In this video, as we start week 1 of Out of the Shadows, we're going to want to take a few moments to work with some movement as a data collection. So during this video, you can do it whenever you'd like, but the intention is to start off the week early with this movement as a background understanding before we move forward. It will take a few moments and you may need to pause the video to allow yourself to feel into your body. There's no right or wrong, really. Whatever comes up is exactly what we want to work with, as long as you're not causing harm to you or someone else. And yet you'll want enough time and space to do this brief experiential where you can actually physicalize the movement about 3 different times. So it'll be 3 different movements done 3 different times during the course of this video. And so if you are in an area where it's public or there are people coming in and out, you might want to wait until you have a little bit of privacy. You don't have to have a lot of room for this. It can all be done like right here in our near space of our kinesphere. You could be gesturing, that's fine. But if you are someone who likes to take up more space and move more full out, you might want to wait until you have that space. So during this first week, we're just going to be noticing what our habits are and our feelings connected to them before we really try to change them. And the reason why is because whatever it is that someone has been struggling with in Out of the Shadows, there is a reason why they have been struggling. So that behavior or thought pattern has served a purpose, right? And coming from the Personal Transformation Institute's method of EMDR, we think of these thoughts or behaviors as answers, and what we don't need to do is push them aggressively out, because like anyone, if something is trying to be pushed out, often the natural response is to like push back. So we want to just observe and get to know our answers first a little bit in this first week. That might take doing some self-compassion work, which will be addressed in our mindfulness component this week. But in the meantime, we're just going to try to non-judgmentally observe our behaviors and thoughts. So one way to do that is through movement. And when I say movement, I mean that this could be movement that is gestural, movement that is very abstract, movement that makes sense to someone looking at it, movement that doesn't. All of those are welcome. We're just looking for a physicalization of your emotion. So for instance, I'm going to give a couple of examples and then we'll do the actual exercise. So example of something more like gestural, if I were feeling tired, I could gesture that by being like, did I say tired? I think I said tired, yeah. If I were feeling tired, I could be like, sad, you know. If I were feeling sad, I might be like, you know, like that. Those are pretty gesture-based movements that can pretty clearly express what is happening. Those are fine. A way that I personally like to work with this is a little bit more open to not being as obviously understood by someone watching me. And so tired for me might look something more like, you know, that was what came out of my body when I thought of tired. And someone could guess that from looking at the movement, or someone might not be able to, and that's okay. It's about what connects for me internally, like this is tired to me. And that may change. So if I were doing these types of movement related exercises and I felt a sense of tired, I could try that, and I would do it 3 times to kind of get in it and see if that felt right, see if it wanted to change at all, see if I learned anything from doing that movement. Another example, so that's kind of like my body's just response to the idea of tired. Another thought might be, if I were thinking of sad, you might notice as I call up the energy of sad, where I feel it in the body. And so for me, sad right now is landing here in the kind of heart area. And so I might, in my movement, if I were trying to show sadness, I might be like, just kind of notice it in my body and then connect to that place, like sad, you know, like something here that feels here. Someone else is sad, maybe like, or like, you can see that, but that hurt actually. So there's no right or wrong in how we express these things. It really is about how do I connect to the prompt. And then I would stick with sad for 3 repetitions, like sad. I would take slower time to do that than what I'm doing right now. That is my cat. There he goes. So hopefully that gives you an idea. If you need to write me with any questions over email or Voxer, please do. And then I will be writing a prompt that goes with this that you will also get. So I will take a moment to go through these exercises. So exercise number 1 is we want to invite in just a little bit of awareness about the behavior that we are looking to curb or get more compassion around. So for instance, if there is a behavior that you are wanting to address, I'm going to invite you in your mind right now to just take a moment to breathe and to call up that behavior in your mind. You can close your eyes if you'd like. And I'm going to invite you to explore this behavior in movement in 3 different ways. So the first way, we want to call it up a little bit, just kind of let it land in our body, the behavior that I'm looking to work with. Just noticing how the body feels as we do that. And then I'm going to invite you to move about what happens right before that behavior. So I'm going to give a couple of examples, and they may or may not at all relate for you. But let's say I'm letting the behavior come up in my mind, in my heart. I'm thinking about what happens right before them. And let's say often before this behavior, I'm rushing around and I'm really, really agitated. So for me, for Lauren, the way that movement would come about is something like this. So if that were my movement, I might be like this, and I'm going to repeat it 3 times to just kind of lean into it a little more. It can change, it can move, it doesn't have to stay stagnant, but let's repeat that movement that is right for you 3 times. I'm going to use my example, but you are welcome to close your eyes and do your example. If you need to pause to feel into this for a moment, please do. So let's do that movement of what happens right before the behavior. So we do it one time, however long it needs to go, and then 2 times, and then 3 times. So that's the movement of what's happening before. We're just collecting data. Then I'm going to invite you to pause and notice how that feels in your body. And then I'll invite you to take a moment and find a movement that connects to when you are engaging in the behavior or the thought. So depending on what that behavior or thought might be, you could do a movement that actually is very similar to it if you would like. That might be a little triggering, so some people might not want to do that. You trust your gut on that. I personally like abstract movements, and so for me, a behavioral movement might be something like, I'm trying not to think too much because that can get in the way. So this might be the behavior. So if I were wanting to connect to my behavior, I'm going to do that in movement of some kind 3 times. So you might pause for a moment and just take a second to try to explore and find what that movement is for you. If you need to do that, you can. And then we'll go through whatever that movement is about 3 times. So I'm going to stick with the one that I did, but yours might look very different. It doesn't have to look anything like mine. But let's find our first repetition of it. So whatever the behavior movement is. And then, I forgot to count, but 2 and 3 of them. Both of mine have a kind of continual energy, but if it were something like, I don't know what that is, but if it were that, we would repeat that 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. Again, whatever makes sense to you and your body. So we've done before the movement, before the behavior or thought, during the behavior or thought, and now we're going to pause for a moment and just notice how that feels. And then we're going to go to what happens after. So I'm tapping into, for me, a behavior that I'm trying to curb, and that would mean that for me afterwards I might not feel so great. Or maybe I feel really good for a moment, but not so great afterwards. So what's a movement that could show that expression? So without thinking about it too much, but pausing if you need to pause, you can take a moment to gather that information of what is the movement connected to right after the behavior. And for me, I'm going to do an example so that we can repeat the movement 3 times. So my example would be, that's just happened to be what came up for me. So let's repeat whatever your movement is 3 times, and I'll just stick with the one that I did for repetition's sake. 1, and let it go on as long as it needs to. And then 2. Let it go on as long as it needs to. And then 3. And then we'll take a moment to pause and see how that feels. And then we're going to take a moment to just string them together and see how that feels for 3 repetitions. It's very common for movement to change and evolve, and so as we do this, if you notice that there is some kind of morphing that happens, then I invite you to allow that. It doesn't have to stay stuck, and we don't have to worry about getting it right. It's whatever it's going to be right now. So if you can go back and remember what your first movement was, just kind of remember that in your mind. So mine was something like, I think mine's already changed. This. And then this, go back to the movement about the behavior. So mine was something like this. And then the one right afterwards. And so for mine, I'm going to string them together and they'll look like this. So we'll go movement number 1, movement number 2, movement number 3, and just see how that feels. I'm going to invite you to repeat that at your own pace. Movement number 1, it might go on a lot longer than mine does, and that's okay. Movement number 2, and then movement number 3, and last one. And then I'm going to invite you to just pause for a moment and notice how that feels. You may want to take a moment and document, just journal, free form about anything that you observed, stringing those movements together. And these movements are a little choreography that can be done in a car or in a chair related to the behavior that we're seeking to lean into and get a little more information around. So in your package, you'll get some more information about how to work with these movements, and they will be something we might return to. So if you can jot down or record them on your phone, that could be helpful, but it's not required. Okay, so for today, that's what we will do. We will collect the data, and then what I'm going to invite you to play with throughout the week is noticing if these movements change at all. So if you have an urge to engage in a behavior, I'm going to invite you to take a moment, check in with how your body's feeling, and notice if it feels like that energy of right before a behavior. You don't have to change anything except just taking a moment to pause and get aware about it. But if it feels good, when you're thinking about engaging in that behavior, you could try going through your choreography and just seeing what happens if you embody that cycle of your movement or your behavior and see if there's something that you can glean from what's going on right now. Does it feel like my movement number 1? If I engage in this behavior, is it going to feel like what happens in movement number 2 through 3? Or not? Does it feel really different today? Do I need to change my choreography because today maybe the movement feels like I'm tired instead of this one, or whatever that is. So just play around and see what you find out. And there will be more instructions about how to work with that as we continue. Looking forward to getting to know you and your movement more.